Hey, welcome to 12 Tone. Today we're going to talk about polychords. Polychords are when you play two or more chords at the same time, but why would you do that? Does it even work? Wouldn't they just clash and sound terrible? Well, most of the time, yeah. Polychords are often used to evoke a sort of dissonant bitonality, like with Stravinsky's Petrushka chord. This is where you play two major triads with roots a tritone apart, like this F sharp major, over this C major. This is a really interesting sound because it's simultaneously very dissonant and very, very major. Normally, we associate major chords with consonance and stability, but by smashing two unrelated ones together, we've made something unstable and pretty gross without losing that signature sound. Petrushka is also a great example of polytonality, which is playing in multiple keys at once. This is an extension of the idea of polychords. If we can have more than one chord at a time, why not more than one key? And Petrushka takes this even further, using two keys that together cover the entire chromatic scale. You can easily see this on a piano where C major uses all the white keys and F sharp major includes all the black ones. Quick side note about notation, we write polychords kind of like fractions with one chord on top of the other. This looks dangerously similar to the slash chord notation we use for inversions, so if your handwriting is as bad as mine, be careful. Moving on, another common polychord is what's known as a split chord. Here the two chords have the same root but different qualities, like this D major over D minor. Split chords get their name because they're splitting the third and they can give you some pretty interesting sounds. The two chords are pretty similar, but playing them together really highlights the difference, and because they have the same root in fifth, this is one of the only polychords you can pull off in four-part writing. Just make sure to separate the thirds by at least an octave so they don't clash too hard. In fact, some theorists would argue that because the chords share so many notes in common, split chords aren't really polychords at all, viewing them instead as triads with a single added note, which brings up an interesting point. Are any of these really two different chords? I mean, between chord tones and tensions, we have the technology to describe any set of notes as a single harmonic object. For instance, we could call the Petrushka chord C7 flat 9 sharp 11, and yet that's not how we think about it. Why? Well, let's take a closer look at extended chords. Here, for instance, is G minor 11. If we take just the bottom three notes, we have a G minor triad. If we take the top three notes, though, we have another chord, F major. In fact, G minor 11 has 4 different triads inside it, making it a massive polychord. In this sense then, polychords may not be giving us new sets of notes to play with. Instead, they're giving us a different way to think about the notes we already have. If you tell half your band to play G minor and half to play F major, it'll sound very different from telling them all to play G minor 11. Which brings us to one of the most important techniques for writing and playing polychords: separation. If you jumble all the notes together, it's usually going to sound like one complex chord. But if we separate them by an octave, or give them to different instruments, you hear more of that bitonality. It starts to sound like there really are two separate chords happening at once. But these are just a small taste of the available polychords. You can put any chord you want over any other chord. Some of them will sound nasty, some pretty nice, and some just downright weird. They're complex, challenging sounds, and they should be handled with care, but even if you never encounter them in the wild, I think it's nice to know that they're out there. Waiting. Lurking. And that's Polychords. Try the exercises, join our mailing list for scans of all our episodes, feel free to suggest future topics in the comments, and keep on rockin'.